Good day, everybody. This is Yin Yang in California with Morsels of a Thought number 1430. Today we are on the R Factor by Ken Ashby and Maris Segal, Evolving Our Human Relationship Story. This is a national bestseller. Discover the universal rhythms for leading prosperous relationships. And we read this in the back last time. I'm going to read chapter 2 and chapter 3. Chapter 2 is named Opportunity. We are where we are when we're meant to be. It wasn't the first time Rich had been backstage after a performance, but it was the most memorable invitation he'd accepted. For one thing, the band, Silver Daughter, was one of the biggest names in the business, and an opportunity to meet its members was without a doubt an invitation that few, if any, would turn down. For superfans, it would be a dream come true. For a songwriter like Rich, it meant being invited into an exclusive, tight-knit circle that could open doors to the fame he'd longed for since the day he'd penned his first song many years before. From the moment he walked through the door, Mindy made sure he felt comfortable, whether she was introducing him to the drummer or letting the bodyguards know he was her guest and therefore welcome in the room. She went out of her way to make sure he didn't feel out of place. It was obvious to Rich that she was well respected and liked by everyone, but it didn't escape his attention that while she had earned their trust, she never let her guard down. She was constantly on the lookout for anything amiss. It wouldn't be the first time she'd have to cut off someone who was overserved or rescue an artist who couldn't get away from an admiring fan. As soon as Mindy saw the first sign that the band was ready to wrap it up, she subtly directed to the bartender that it was last call and asked the caterer to start taking down the food tables. Rich watched from the sidelines as she walked through the room and thanked them for their service. Taking the cue, Rich approached her to say goodbye and thank her for her hospitality. "Give me a minute to grab my things," she said, "and I'll walk out with you." As they exited the arena, she indicated she was parked close by and could give him a ride to his car, an invitation he gladly accepted. "So, I bet you're ready to go home and put your feet up," he commented. "Well, I should, but I'm starving. I usually get a bite to eat before heading home," she said. "There's an all-night pancake house down the street that I often go to." And before she realized it, she heard herself say, "Do you want to join me?" Surprised by the offer, Rich said, "Sure, I'd like that," welcoming the opportunity to get her know her a little better. 10 minutes later, they were seated and had already placed their orders. "An omelet, hash browns, and toast," Rich said as he lifted his coffee cup. "I'm guessing you don't eat much on days like today." "Yeah, like most concert days, I got to work at 10 o'clock this morning, and I barely remember eating a sandwich on the run," she sighed. "A 14-hour day, huh? You must be exhausted," he said. "I'm used to it," she said, shrugging her shoulders. "It is a long day, but it takes a huge team and a lot of preparation and coordination to put on a concert of this caliber. We work to exceed the expectations of the musicians and make sure the audience gets the show they deserve." "Well, judging by what I experienced tonight, it seemed flawless," he complimented her. "Thank you," she laughed. "Tell me, how did you get into producing concerts?" Rich asked. "I kind of fell into it. When I graduated from college, I got an internship and was introduced to someone who took me under his wing and mentored me. After a couple years working alongside him, I became his assistant, and he taught me everything he knew. Funny, I wasn't even looking for a career in the music industry, but here I am." "What do you like the most about your job?" he asked. "The money, and on most days, the people," she answered without hesitating. "Most people would give anything to get to be on a first name basis with the artists and groups you work with," he agreed. "I'm sure, and the fact that I'm fortunate isn't lost on me, but the job isn't all about rubbing shoulders with the rich and famous," she corrected. "Oh?" he asked, pushing her to elaborate. "What don't you like about it?" She says, for starters, there is a lot of pressure and little room for error, and I work nearly every weekend, which is not conducive to a family life, let alone a social life. I have a 6-year-old at home, and if it wasn't for my parents, I couldn't do it. No husband? Asked Rich. No, my daughter's father isn't very involved, so I count on my parents to take care of Rose when I'm working, Mindy replied. You must have a staff, people who take some of your work off your plate so you don't have to put in so many hours on days like today, he inquired. Don't get me wrong, I have a great team, but ultimately the responsibility for producing concerts of this magnitude falls on me. It's what I signed up for, and I take my job seriously, which means that I can't rely on anyone else to make sure everything goes smoothly. Then, turning the conversation toward him, Mindy felt comfortable enough to ask, how about you, Rich? Are you married? Do you have kids? No to both, he answered nonchalantly as he took a sip of his coffee. Oh, are you a perpetual bachelor? She teased, determined that you'll never settle down? It probably looks that way, he chuckled, but I guess I just never met the right person at the right time. I'm married to my work all week as a stockbroker, and I've enjoyed a great deal of success over the years. I'm fortunate that I'm in a position financially that I can step back when I want, or even retire altogether. Unlike a lot of songwriters, I don't fit the mold. You know, the one where you constantly have to work at a job you hate to be able to put food on the table while you're waiting for a big break. If I want, I can walk away from the computer and spend all my time writing music. Neither choice is conducive to meeting people and building romantic relationships. While many people are on date nights on the weekends, I usually meet up with a group of local songwriters and we collaborate to help each other write what we hope will be the next hit song. That's probably not much fun for someone who doesn't want their big break in the industry. It's a dream that comes with more disappointments than rewards, but it's a dream that I can't seem to stop chasing. I get it. You've got to chase the dream because the dream won't chase you, she added. That's the truth, Rich nodded in agreement. I've had 1,000 reasons to give up, but something keeps me going. You'd think rejection would wear most people down, but I keep telling myself I'm just one song away from making it big. And you might be. You did say that you've had a couple songs published, right? That must reinforce your dream, I imagine, Mindy said. Well, it is good for the ego, Rich smiled. And yes, a couple of my songs have made it as album fillers and a few other placements, but that's as far as I've gotten. You can find them on YouTube, but they don't get any radio play, let alone top algorithm ranking. Here's to your fame and fortune, she said, lifting up her coffee cup as their server set their bill on the table. And it looks like this is our signal that it's time to go. Let me, Rich said, reaching for the bill. No, I invited you. I'll pay, she insisted. You've been more than generous tonight, Mindy. Let me get the bill. I insist, he argued. Okay, thank you, she said graciously. No thanks necessary. All I ask is you take a few minutes to listen to my song and give me your honest opinion. Do you still have my card? I do, she answered, patting the front pocket of her purse. I'll be happy to listen to it. And don't worry, I'll tell you what I really think. Good. Don't worry about hurting my feelings. By now, my skin has gotten pretty thick, he smiled. I bet, she agreed. Funny, isn't it, that I do everything I can to avoid the slightest criticism in my job, and you're the exact opposite, opening yourself up to it over and over again? Sometimes I'd like to be a little more like you and worry less about what other people think. I know. The music business does have a lot of ups and downs, doesn't it? What I wouldn't give for a steadier rhythm now and then, he said as they walked out of the restaurant. Late the next morning, Rich received Mindy's text message. Rich, after listening to your song, I have to be honest and say that I'm not feeling it. It's not doing anything for me, which disappoints me because I did enjoy the one song I heard before. But this one is not for me. Thanks for the opportunity to give feedback. Mindy. In disbelief, Rich read the text again. His initial disappointment quickly turned to defensiveness. Could they possibly be talking about the same song? The same song that he truly believed was the best choice he'd ever had to have a hit song under his belt? Best chance he'd ever had to have a hit song under his belt? Needing an explanation, he texted her back. What didn't you like, the melody or the lyrics? Her response was short and immediate. Sorry, it just didn't resonate with me. Taking a few minutes to let her curt reply sink in, he became offended, and in reaction, he jotted off a reply that didn't hold back his feelings. Thanks, but I think there are a lot of people who would disagree with your opinion. I should know. I'm a songwriter, and you're not. Before taking a second to think twice, he hit send and didn't regret it. Who was she to criticize him? She was a concert producer, but did she know anything about songwriting? When Mindy read his reply, she sighed and tossed her phone on the table. Instantly, she wanted to kick herself, not because she had stated her honest opinion, but because she had allowed herself to become friendly with Rich, a songwriter who obviously was interested in how her career could benefit him. She knew better than to mix business with pleasure, something she'd never done in the past. It was a rule she'd imposed on herself. She'd crossed the line when she invited Rich backstage to meet the band, and she'd taken a giant step over it again when she invited him to join her for breakfast. When he'd asked her to listen to his song, she agreed, expecting that his experience in the music world had thickened his skin, but obviously it hadn't. I went out of my way and made an exception for this guy, and this is the thanks I get. I guess no good deed goes unpunished. It's my day off. I don't have time for this, she thought to herself as she silenced her phone and walked away from it and their conversation, returning to the game she was playing with Rose. I'm going to read the chapters um, and the rest of the. I can't remember which ones I read. Dear me. I'm going to read the chapters today. The dedication. We dedicate this book to our parents who were connected in life and love, each married over 50 years. Their spirit and energy continue to inspire our relationships every day. They modeled for us how to show respect, be responsible, reframe limiting beliefs, and stand up with resilience. We are their living legacy. Robert and Deborah Segal, John and Jean Ashby, and to our beautiful family for whom we stand in gratitude every day, Kim and Jet, Cindy, Grace, Sam, and Will, Ryan and Amanda, John, Adriana, Kaylee, Peyton, and Blake. We honor our relationships with each of you and look forward to all the adventures that will continue to unfold. The R Factor. 1. Connection, which we read last week. 2. Opportunity, which we read today. 3. Relationships, which I will read in a minute. Respect. 4. Listen. 5. Trust. 6. Choices. Responsibility. 7. Intention. 8. Communicate. Reframing. 9. Gratitude. 10. Acceptance. 11. Perspective. Resilience. 12. Consistency. 13. Inspiration. 14. Change. 15. Vision. Universal relationship rhythms. Afterward. Each of Us lyrics by Ken Ashby. Acknowledgments and about the authors. So next we'll read relationships. Chapter 3. Relationships are the most significant factor impacting and influencing every aspect of our life. I'll read it again. Relationships are the most significant factor impacting and influencing every aspect of our life. While music played an integral part of both their lives, that was the only similarity between Rich and Mindy. They each had different goals. More than anything, Rich wanted to write that mega hit song that he'd dreamed of since the first day he picked up a guitar. Sure, he'd had some success. 2 of his songs had been published, and while they had fed his ego, his success was nowhere near the magnitude that he longed for. Mindy, on the other hand, had already achieved her professional goals. She was an acclaimed concert producer who was well respected by artists and bands around the world. Yet she struggled internally, wondering why her successes weren't mirrored in her personal life. It had been years since her daughter was born that she'd had a romantic relationship, and truth told, there were no prospects in sight. When did she have the time to even meet people? She worked long hours, and because she felt guilty about leaving Rose with her parents so often, every minute of her time away from work was spent with her. Mindy knew something needed to change. Her father had indicated he was ready to retire and had given her subtle hints, reminding her that her parents had a lifelong goal of being able to travel in their golden years. Lately, this had been on her mind as she contemplated what their absence would mean to her and her daughter Rose. There was no way she would feel comfortable leaving her with people she didn't know. There weren't too many people in the world that she trusted or even allowed to enter her immediate family circle. For that reason, she never mixed her personal life with her professional life and had spent her entire career making sure there was a firm line between the two. It was one reason why she had accomplished so much in her role, but it was also the reason for the potential turmoil she faced at home. Rich also had enjoyed a successful career as a stockbroker in Los Angeles, managing sizable portfolios for his clients. While he wasn't passionate about his job, his position had enabled him to live comfortably and be able to afford to pursue his real passion, songwriting. Lately, though, that wasn't enough. He wanted more than a paycheck. Rich longed for something more fulfilling in his life, and in his opinion, every song he wrote had the potential, excuse me, every song he wrote had the potential to bring him one step closer to finding whatever that was. He truly believed that fate had interceded to make that happen when he met Mindy Rhodes after the concert. It had been the first time he'd been bold enough to make his way backstage, and he couldn't believe his luck when she invited him to meet the band and then accompany her for a bite to eat. Everybody who was anybody in the business knew her name, and a connection with her could be the one ticket to breaking big into the industry. Of course, he wanted to take advantage of it. Unfortunately, her response blindsided him. Where was the woman who had been so pleasant and, yes, friendly the night before? There wasn't a single sign of her in her text messages, that was for sure. Torn between anger and disappointment, he sought validation by listening to his song over and over in an attempt to see if there was something he was missing. But that didn't change his opinion. In his eyes, he still had a hit on his hands, regardless of her opinion, which he reminded himself was just that, an opinion. Yet her words gnawed at him, so much so that he knew he couldn't let it rest, and he knew just who to turn to: his father, the one person he could trust to tell him the truth. An hour later, he was sitting across the table from his dad as he'd done countless times before. He had turned to his father all of his life for support, guidance, and his honest feedback. He had inherited his love for music from his dad, who had owned his own radio station. As a kid, he'd spent countless hours at the station learning how to use the equipment and listening to the top hits that were aired. When he'd wanted to learn how to play the guitar, his dad encouraged him and signed him up for lessons. When he wanted to pursue songwriting on a full-time basis, it was his dad who advised him not to quit his day job just yet. You need a steady paycheck, son. Work and save your money until the day you can afford to take that risk, he'd said. And Rich had listened, as he usually did, to his father's advice. Through the years, he'd found that his dad was usually right, too. You seem a little riled up, son. What's going on? The older man asked as he focused keenly on his son through his glasses. I guess I am, Dad. I just got a rather blunt rejection for one of my songs from the concert producer I met last night, and I have to say that I don't agree with her. Will you do me a favor and listen to it and let me know what you think? Rich asked. Neither one made a sound during the 2-minute, 35-second track. When it was over, Rich turned to his dad and asked the ultimate question. Now, Dad, before you tell me what you think, I want you to read what this woman, Mindy Rhodes, sent me, he said, pulling out his phone and sharing the texts. His father was silent as he read the texts. Then he sat the phone on the table and slowly took his glasses off. Well, what do you think? Rather harsh, wasn't she? Rich asked. Well, she didn't mince words, so tell me, what's your problem with this? The rejection or the way it was worded? Guess both. I mean, we had a good time the night before, even though we'd just met. She even invited me backstage, and we went out to breakfast at the end of the night, Rich answered. Ah, so having just met her, it's safe to say that you don't really know each other. You don't really have a relationship, his father said. Perhaps this is the real problem. What? I don't get it. What are you talking about, Dad? Which you either have a relationship to someone or something, or a relationship with them. There is a difference. Look at us, for example. You were related to me from the moment you were born, but from that time you have a relationship with me. However, I don't believe you have a relationship with this woman, Mindy, at all. On the other hand, you do seem to have a relationship with your song. Perhaps what happened here was that you believed that your relationship with your song transferred to Mindy, but it did not. Go on, I'm listening, Rich prodded. What I'm saying is that an omelet and a cup of coffee do not constitute a relationship. After spending a brief amount of time together, I think you ought to have expected her to respond differently, perhaps more favorably, because she knew you. However, her response was quite short and to the point. It's obvious that her response was all business, and she didn't take into account any relationship with you other than one that was from a purely professional standpoint, his father suggested. So you're saying that I was the one in the wrong? Rich's tone was once again defensive. I will say that I think the conversation might have gone differently if you had responded to her rather than reacting to what she said, the older man offered. But I did respond. Wait a minute, son. Remember, it's not always what you say, it's how you say it. Let me explain. It all goes back to relationships. When you relate to something, you react to it, which leaves nowhere to go. However, when you make a connection and have a relationship with someone, you respond to it, and that offers more of an exchange. There is a difference. You let your emotions and ego get in the way and reacted to her rejection of your song. Simply put, you took it personally, and I can see that by your knee-jerk reply, his father pointed out. Well, I do disagree with her, Dad. How do you think I should have handled it? Asked Rich. I think your best interests would have been better served if you'd taken the time to consider your words before replying. In that way, you would have thoughtfully responded to her instead of reacting to her feedback. Like I said, your reaction tells me that you don't have a relationship with this person. Rich, you have a relationship with the outcome, but not the person, and it shows. You expected more than you should have, but those expectations were based on false premises. Rich sat silently and let his father's words sink in. As usual, he knew his dad was right. Based on their initial connection, he did have high expectations and he did take her opinion personally. If he was honest with himself, he knew that his reply to her was unfair. After all, he had asked for her opinion and she had given it, even though he still didn't agree with it. Okay, Dad, I get it now. I was wrong. And Mindy didn't deserve my reply. I think I owe her an apology for that. But you still haven't told me what you think of my song, Rich pointed out. Well, I'm not an expert, but I think I have to agree with Mindy. Although I wouldn't state it so bluntly, I don't think the song is there just yet, his dad said. Really? Rich sighed, wishing his father's feedback had been more favorable. Can you tell me where it could be improved upon? Rich, just as with Mindy, I can't put my finger on any specific thing and tell you to work on it, but I can tell you that I don't think you've established a connection with your song, his dad said thoughtfully. What? I'm more connected to this song than any song I've ever written, Dad, and I've written hundreds, Rich exclaimed. Once again, Rich, I'm talking about relationships. You're related to your song because you gave birth to it, but you don't have a relationship with it just yet. I think you're mistaking a connection with the outcome for a connection with the song, his dad suggested. If you want me to tell you what's wrong with your song, I can't. That's because it's not about what's there. It's about what's not there, his dad said. Not there? What are you talking about, Dad? Son, relationships are a factor impacting and influencing every aspect of our life, personal and professional, and they have a beat, a tempo, and a rhythm. From my point of view, you haven't been living in sync with that rhythm. I told you once not to quit your day job, but you're at a place now where you have the money and the ability to pursue what you really want. Perhaps it's time for you to go all in. Rich, I'm inviting you to get curious, get out of your head, and stop focusing on fame. Leave your ego at the door and write from your heart. Feel the rhythm. That's where you'll find what's missing. That's where you'll discover what's missing in your song and perhaps in your life. While his father's wise words were spoken firmly, Rich knew they were spoken with love and his best interests at heart. I hear you. There's something missing, Rich said, unable to hide his frustration. And only you can figure out what that is. Your song is your baby, and everything that is in it comes from inside of you. When you figure out what's missing in your life and in your heart, maybe then you will be able to express it in your songs. His father's words gave him a lot to think about on the drive home, a trip he knew by heart. As he recalled their conversation, he became more uncomfortable with his father's words about connecting from his heart, and he came to the realization that, as usual, his dad's insights hit the mark. Maybe there was something missing, that one thing that would make all the difference in his songs. He had always thought that the missing link was having the right connections, and he had to admit that he had hoped that Mindy would be the key that would unlock those doors. Sadly, he had to acknowledge the fact that he might have blown it. Thinking of Mindy, he reminded himself to apologize for his reply. Stopping for a passing train, he spent several minutes thinking of the best way to word his response. Just before the crossing gates rose, he got a glimpse of the caboose pulling up the rear of the freight train. The bright yellow graffiti sprayed on it depicted only one word: respect. So, not tomorrow, but next Sunday, we will read about respect. In the rhythm of respect, we show up and we're present. We listen, we build trust, and lead with compassion and authenticity. When we bring respect, our relationships are collaborative and empowered. So, I want to say that I have a goal of giving you morsels of a thought of wisdom every day, and that when we do the right thing, we are committing virtue, virtuous acts. And so when we have morsels of a thought of wisdom to think about every day and probably do, we can make this a more virtuous world. Okay, so I'll see you later. I do have to explain that I was 4 hours late today because at 4:49, I was putting on my makeup, getting ready for 5:10. At 5:55, I looked in the mirror after my makeup was done, and I said, "How is it 5:55, not 4:55? It's only been 3 minutes, 6 minutes. How is it?" So I don't know where that hour went. And yesterday, I met the best mom and daughter couple there I could have seen at the Walgreens, at the post office, at the Safeway. I was parked and I said, in the spirit of the holiday, I come out of my car, I say, "Pardon me, I live near here. My name is Ying. And I would like to know if you'd like me to buy you a cup of coffee and sit down for a little conversation." And they said yes, Carol and Beth. Carol was in a high-tech wheelchair, high-tech purple wheelchair. It was so cool, so cool. It was so cool. And Beth is a doctor in New Mexico and was visiting for about 2 days. And they said that I made their holiday, and I said that they totally made my day. It was a wonderful conversation. It took about a week to get the coffee from the counter, but it was fun. And I have to say that if you feel like it and you think of something virtuous to do, it's not like you have to talk to any random person. But if you have the spirit and the spirit moves you to do something fun, get somebody a cup of coffee. It was fun. I really enjoyed it. And I came home and spent my time with the 100-year-old woman that lives near me. We go to the garden every day, and I explained this to her. And my goodness, was it ever fun. So I will talk to you again later. Okay, old Kinderhook. Bye.